Wow, hello everybody. Thank you all so much for coming out for tonight's wonderful event. We're very happy to have Arnold White doing his book release here at the Bexley Public Library tonight. My name is Zach Parrish. I am the programming librarian here at the Bexley Public Library. Just a quick note on how today's program will work. We're very happy to have such an incredible crowd here at the library, but this is a hybrid program, so we also have people joining online on our live stream. So at the end of tonight's program, after Mimi and Arnold wrap up their conversation, if you have any questions, just raise your hand and I will come around with the microphone. That way everyone in the room can hear what was asked and those at home can also hear what questions were asked tonight. So like I said, we have a packed program, so I'm just going to jump right into it. Oh, really quick, if you're in Bexley tomorrow, please join us. We have our National Road Car Show that will be in the parking lot, and it's our centennial year, so we're kind of doing it as a birthday celebration. We'll have cake and ice cream and some food trucks, so please join us. That is tomorrow from 5 to 8 outside in the parking lot. So we have a wonderful moderator tonight. Millie Chenfeld is beloved in Bexley and around Columbus. I'm sure we all know about Millie. If you've had any kids or grandkids, they might have taken dance class with Millie, or you might have caught a creative writing workshop here at the library. We're very lucky to have her in this community running those workshops. Just to give you the briefest introduction, Millie has presented programs in creative education in 45 states, Puerto Rico, Canada, and Great Britain. She has written numerous poems, stories, articles, and books, and her children's novel, The House at 12 Rose Street, was adapted for a TV special and nominated for an Emmy. Her education books include such titles as Teaching in the Key of Life, Celebrating Your Children and Their Teachers, Creative Experiences for Young Children, and Still Teaching in the Key of Life. And one of Mimi's favorite quotes, if you know her, this jumps out every time you talk to her, is "Nothing Without Joy" by Reggio Emilia. So we're very lucky to have Mimi moderating tonight's event. But we also have a special guest who I will turn it over, who will introduce Arnold and why we're all here tonight. Janet E. Jackson spent 14 years as president and CEO of the United Way of Central Ohio. She was the first woman and the first African American to lead the organization. Prior to the United Way of Central Ohio, Janet served 6 years as Columbus City Attorney, another first for a woman in Columbus. Her election to that office was also the first of an African American. As Columbus City Attorney, she served as the city's chief legal advisor. Before her appointment to city attorney, Janet served nearly 10 years as a Franklin County Municipal Court judge, making her the first African-American female judge in Franklin County history. She holds a BA degree from Wittenberg University and a JD degree from the National Law Center at George Washington University. Please join me in welcoming Janet E. Jackson.
A little bit of Zach's job. If you have phones, please make sure that you turn them off. Make them on the silent mode. Good evening. I am simply thrilled to be with you tonight and to introduce tonight's conversation between author Arnie White and the incomparable Millie Chenfeld. A mutual friend, and I was hoping that he was going to be in the audience, reached out to me. The friend is Fred Rancier. Some of you may know Fred and Kathy. Reached out to me a few months ago on Arnie's behalf. I understand they are friends and, if not daily walkers, at least once a week. And he indicated that Arnie wanted my phone number. He wanted to chat with me about a project that he had. I must admit, I didn't ask Arnie the why. Why me? But anyway, we talked, and he made a request that I read his new book, The Matter of Honor, and to be a part of this evening's program. Arnie provided me with an advanced reader's copy of his book. I read it. I actually devoured it. Now, I experienced a number of very emotional responses to the book. One was sheer disbelief at some of the words, and anger. Anger. Why the anger? Part of recalling memories of my early life. For those of you who don't know, and you wouldn't, I am from Southern Virginia. I grew up in the segregated South. I'm one of the first African Americans to integrate an all-white high school. So you can only guess at what some of my early experiences were. And then I moved to Columbus after law school, right around the time that I believe the setting of this book, 1978, 79, and I started my legal career. That certainly in reading Arnie's book and my own experiences were somewhat parallel from the professional perspective. But before tonight's event, I met with Arnie. We were sitting right almost across the street outside of Kitty's. I got a real feel of what it's like to live in Bexley. I live in Berwick, close, but it's not the same as sitting there. And he was very clear with his instructions to me about my role tonight. I am not to address the artistic side of the book. That will be done by Arnie and Mimi. Rather, to identify the important issues that he raises in this legal thriller. And I'm not going to try to go and give context to each of these. I'm just going to name them because you're not really here to listen to me. But I tell you what, if there's anyone in this audience who's a part of a book club and you're going to read this, just invite me because I would love to be able to talk about it. The first major concern as I read the book was simply the understanding the injustice, the incredible injustice of our justice system. The next one was hard. The racism that was, and yes, in my opinion, is still a part of that system. The role that poverty and class structure play in our legal system. And connected with that poverty, the issue of individuals who are arrested and having to post a cash bail. The number of individuals that sit in our jails awaiting trial because they can't post that bond or bail, and many of them never go to trial. The cases are actually dismissed. Politics. Now, when you read the book, I hope you have as much fun as I did trying to identify who the players were. Now, it's fiction, but at book club, let's talk about this because I certainly could identify a few. And just the role that politics played in the injustice that was brought upon the main character. A system that treats those who are incarcerated less than human beings when it comes to basic medical care, both from the physical perspective and the mental health perspective. An overarching theme, one that's important to me and Arnie, is that of civil rights. Not only have I lived it, I started my career in this community as a civil rights attorney, and it's still my first love after all of these years. The vulnerability of women who are involved in our criminal justice system, as those who have been arrested and detained, but I would go further and even say some of those that play roles in the system, such as guards, etc. They are subjected to inhumane treatment. And I think I said it before, but I'll come back to it one more time. Finally, just basic civil rights. And if you're not concerned about that very issue today, in 2024, I suggest we grab coffee over at Kitty's. So without any further comments from me, please welcome to the stage our author of The Matter of Honor, Arnie White, and Mamie Chenfeld.
Before we begin, I think a few thank yous are in order. First to Zach at the Bexley Public Library. He's been just great helping us get this program on the road. I really appreciate it. The fostering of art in our community is the center of it, I think, is the Bexley Public Library. And it's because of Zach and others that is why it happens. I want to thank my beta readers. There were more than a dozen, I think, who read the books. I say books because it went through, I think, 5 or 6 major revisions, which will come to your question in a while. And they patiently read my book. The first few of them were not so good, but I hope it got better. I want to thank Three Towers Press, who had faith in my book and took a shot at it. Kira Henschel, the owner, is someone that I will truly treasure. Paul Dinas, a editor who used to be the editor of the Kensington publications nationwide, was my production editor, and we'll talk about him in a minute. I want to thank him. And last of all, my wife, who cannot be here today because she had a knee replacement, but she is watching, I hope. So thanks to them all.
Is this working? Can you guys, if you can? Well, I'm thrilled to be here because I was in on 3 of the revisions. And it's an amazing process. And I just cannot tell you, some people here write, because I see a lot of our friends here. But if you're a writer and you go through an entire book and then you revise it, we are talking a very challenging and long, involved commitment. It's either you're insane or you're committed. Anyway, or you could be committed, anyway.
Hello.
So I thought that also that I wanted to make the point that many of you know, that Arnie is also an absolutely beautiful artist. How many of you know that? He is a wonderful artist. So the first question, the first question I would like him to think about is, what possessed you to leave your work in art, which was taking up a lot of your time, to embrace this project, which ended up taking years of pain, joy, grief, the whole schmear?
That's a good question. I'm not really sure I know the answer. I love doing both, and I spend, probably 4, 5, 6 hours a day doing one or the other. And I don't, as I told you one time, I didn't retire to die. I just look at it as a new stage in my life, and that's what makes me happy.
Arnie, what motivated this story? What motivated the story that started you off on this journey?
The book, I once had a case when I was a young attorney, and as the case went on, and I had spent hours and hours with this case, because it was a situation in which there was a little attorney in a small law firm against some of the biggest law firms in town, including the city attorney's office. But I don't think that at that time you weren't part of it. But during the course of that case, I thought to myself, this would make a good story. And so I saved all my papers, boxes, and I saved them since 1979. And I thought this would make a good story, and I thought maybe I'll write it whenever I get a chance. Well, 30, 40 years later, it took until I finally got the chance. And when I wrote the book, I never opened a box.
That's interesting.
It was there somewhere.
That's good.
But I had a problem with it, and I couldn't quite figure out how to get going. Lee, in answer to your question, in part, I started it, threw it away, started it, threw it away. I didn't get to chapter 3, I don't think, 5, 6 times. And I was talking to somebody, and I don't even know who it was now. And I said, I'm having trouble. What are you doing? Well, I'm trying to write this book. What's the matter? I'm having a terrible time. What's your problem? And I couldn't, and I started to articulate what the problem was, that as I wrote the book, I thought about myself, and then I thought, well, wait a minute, I can't say that because people will think this about me. And another lawyer may challenge my position that I took strategy-wise. And I can't, the person looked at me, thought about it for a second, and said, write it in third person.
Duh.
So when I wrote it in third person, it's no longer me. I'm talking about a lawyer. You don't know what that does to open up a mind. Because if it's not me, then he doesn't have to be a young attorney. He can be an older attorney. Doesn't have to be this, it doesn't have to be. Well, if I'm free to do that, then I'm free to do other things. I'm free to make up characters. I'm free to make up scenes. I'm free to create things that never happened. And it evolves, it grows with you. So that's how I began
That
to
was
write.
wonderful.
That's how it started.
But when you're listening to this, just to remember when next time you read a book, the story behind the writing of the book, which is really, it's unique and universal. Each book has its story of how it was written and the universality of the journey it takes. But I was going to just say, the fact that Arnie is a lawyer, and Jana, you could probably answer more of these questions, but how he blends the law into the story is really important. And if you're a person who's not a legal person, it's fine. It's fine, you understand it, and it's part of the story. So it's like some stories, some books you read, like here comes the academic part and here comes the dramatic part, and it stops to tell you, God bless you, it stops to tell you the information. Through the whole book, the information is blended with the story. And I was going to ask one other question. The whole book is set in a really tropical, exotic place, Columbus, Ohio. So talk about that.
Well, yes, that's another thing that makes it fun, because I get to talk about people. Just change your name. That's all. Just change your name. So I've put together a few people, some of whom are combinations of various people that I put in the book. And what I talked about with Paul Dinas, my editor, conceptual editor, I had the book done. I was completed except for some typos. Didn't take that long, maybe about a year and a quarter. It's all done. And I showed it to some people, and some beta readers, some of whom are in the room, and they went, yeah, that's nice. I'm thinking. And then I talked to Linda Cass across the street, and she said, you need an editor. Well, I found out the old adage that when you complete your manuscript, you're about a third the way done. And that was about right. So I went to Paul. He's in New York, and he's an independent editor. And he read the book. He said, I like your characters. I like your dialogue. I like the flow of it. There's just one little problem. I suggest that you throw away half the book. You probably have no idea what that means to a writer. Right there. And so I thought, but it's beautiful. These are my children. And he said, the way you have written the book, I had it in 2 books, and some of you may have read it that way. The first book started with the person who died all the way through to her death. And the second book is where the attorney gets a call to look into the matter. And he says, start there and throw away all your characters, throw that away, because you're repeating yourself. The lawyer's going to have to find out what they did, what they said. He's going to have to do that to present it to court. You're going to double it's not going to work. And a few other major concessions. So I thought, well, do I want to do that? I mean, how do you kill your babies? And I thought, on the other hand, I paid him a lot of money. He knows what he's doing. He bought the books for Kensington. He's the one who made the final decision which ones they're going to publish and which ones they're not. And so I said, okay, start it all over again. So these are the kinds of frustrations that you get in writing a book. For those who think that you'll be different, you're better than the rest of us, you'll knock it off first time around. Good luck.
Arnie, talk a little about the journey of the book, because he just talked about one revision, and he revised it 5 times.
Yeah.
So, high five. So, not high five, but I think that it's interesting, and just the courage and the patience and the faith you have to have in what you're doing, and the openness to hearing other people's opinions we talked about this a lot, because I was the Jewish mother in some of the stories. I said, only change what you agree with.
Yeah.
Did I say that?
You did, and I took
said,
your
if
advice.
somebody can tell you something, here I'm an editor, and I say do this, get this character out, and you either see it and go, yeah, the character should come out, or you say, I want that character in. So it's like you have all this going on at once with somebody in the second and third revision are people, again, asking him to make changes, and he has to be the person to go, this I want to change, this I don't want to change. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, that's very difficult because some of the changes, I can't help myself to want to make it like it happened. You know, there's a natural tendency of that. I mean, I know that it happened. To go into this other world of, well, maybe it, you know, it didn't happen that way. Make it happen some other way. That's a new world to me. For those of you who are artists, you may have the same thing happen, where you have a reference that you're painting, and you may have an art teacher who says, why is this in the painting? And you say, because it's in the picture. And your art teacher would say, so what? People don't see the photograph, they see your painting. Cut it out. Well, it's that same kind of thing. This is what happened. So what? You're not writing, you know, that's what journalists do. This is a novel. Get rid of that. And you have to elevate yourself to a whole different world of make-believe that is believable. If that makes sense. You know what I'm trying to say, you know, make-believe that's believable. And so that was part of the journey. One of the mother in the case that I had was a Muslim. And Paul said, it isn't going to fly. No one's going to believe that one. I mean, this case is strange enough as it is. You've got to make her a Muslim? I said, but she is. Arnie. That was one of the changes I had to make, and it was a big one. It was you know, because you'll see there's a number of quotes from black civil rights leaders in the book. They were coming from, I had made her not only because she was Muslim, because she was not in the book, but she was originally in the book from Chicago. I decided to make her a black Muslim. Why not? Well, then with that followed that I could talk about Malcolm X, I could talk about others who would be responding. I had to find another way to get that into the book, but I had to cut all of that out. And you come up with great ideas, and then you need somebody to tether you and bring you down and say, no, you're going too far. Your imagination has gotten the best of you. But those are some of the things that occurred during the thing. Technical issues. One of the technical issues that I thank you, Kenny, for correcting. When I was writing the book, there takes place, one scene takes place in a high school. And the high school kid was a big fat white kid who's beaten up on the black kid. Kenny says, wait a minute, there were practically no white kids in 1979 in the schools. And I thought, oh, Kenny, you don't know what you're talking about. I looked it up, and yes, that's right. That's when the desegregation was at its peak. And the schools were so segregated that at East High School, they were more than 90% black. Got to change that character because you're trying to make it real to make believable. He didn't believe it. He was right because that didn't happen in those days, so I had to correct it. So little things, because it's a historical novel as well as a thriller, I have to be correct historically speaking, and thank you for correcting that for me.
I was going to ask you, the book is full of characters. I mean, I don't mean character, I mean, but people who are in the story. Some of them are characters. But anyway, so that's one of the biggest challenges for writers, is writing characters that are believable, and especially the dialogue. Dialogue is very hard to write because some people will just have everyone sound exactly the same. You know, the grandfather says, "How are you?" And the mother says, "I'm fine." And the children say, "Good." And it's all on one level of, and they're not that differentiated. And when you're reading a book, you can hear the people speak and believe in them. And I think Arnie did a really good job creating characters. Some of them were built on people he knew, but he created a lot of new characters that were very believable and very dynamic in the story. You want to talk about your characters?
Well, let's see. The mayor was sort of like a mayor we once had, that I kind of put him in. He's, I guess, a little bit like he was, but I didn't know him very well. I worked for a mayor, but not for the one that's in the book. The prisoners, the inmates were, most of them were made up entirely from whole cloth. There isn't anybody like them that I met, but that's really a hard challenge because of trying to, well, you know, yourselves, just imagine a black female prisoner in a local institution in 1979. If I don't get blank faces from every one of you, I'll be very surprised, because you'd say, I'd have no idea what they would be like. You know, I don't know that world. Well, you know, I'm trying to recall from all the prisoners that I spoke to as an attorney, making up composites of people that are sort of like the people that I have in the book. And some of the characters really died when Paul cut out half the book. I suggest I cut out half the book because I had some more characters that I had created. And maybe one day we'll write another book about some of them and some of their situations. So that's a few of the characters that I had.
Arnie, do you want to read something from your book? A little sample.
Let me read for you, if I could, a bit. This is not dialogue. This part is description. I'm asked to meet with a former inmate about what happened in the institution and what happened to what happened to the person who died. But I have to go in this bar to get her.
No, he doesn't have to. His character has to.
Thank you. As a matter of fact, let me tell you that story for a quick second. This story is only slightly made up. I used to be a parole officer with the Adult Parole Authority, and I had 72 parolees on my watch that came from the joint, and for a year they were under my control. And in those days, all I had to do is sign a slip, and they go back to prison. Well, I'm dating Susan, and we're going out, I think, for her birthday, if I'm not mistaken. I have my best suit on, and looking, you know, to the nines. We're going to go to that restaurant at the top of the Renaissance Hotel that used to be there. What was it called? Yeah, well, whatever, you know, so we're going out, and I'm looking real sharp. I get a call. Mr. White? Yeah. Mr. White, you better come get me. Well, why? I'm not doing so well. He's in this bar. Okay. The bar is, and some of you may know it from the outside. I doubt if anybody was ever in it. Stone's Grill on 4th Street. In this skinny bar, lonely customers found solace in semi-darkness. Unwelcomed elsewhere, wounded Vietnam vets, released mental patients, and a few former inmates breaking probation and parole sat alone with others, pouring down a few. Tacky smoke like low-hanging clouds floated in the upper regions of its windowless space. Gold, that's the name of the attorney, Gold hesitated after his first steps into the dankness, his ears filled with honky-tonk music, whining from a jukebox next to the bar, and his nose itched from the smell of cheap liquor and tobacco smoke. All eyes turned toward the man at the door wearing a suit. All talk stopped. Usually those wearing ties were cops, parole officers, or others coming to thin the herd. Suddenly a rush of patrons ran to the John or hid their faces. After his eyes adjusted and the crowd calmed down, Gold spotted what appeared to be a young girl sitting alone in a corner booth, the smoke from her cigarette adding to the haze. Gold walked over. Ms. Gates? Maybe. Who are you? Alan Gold. Johnny asked me to meet you here. I am the attorney for Honor Wilson's mother. The dead girl? Yeah, she got shit on.
We're going to leave time for your questions too, but I'm just going to ask him a few more. Is that okay? Okay. Arnie, what were the easiest things to write about in the book? These easiest kind of contents, and what were the most difficult?
The easiest for me was the law, of course. I mean, I was a lawyer for 52 years, so trying to explain to people the law while I had to massage it to make it understandable for everybody else. That to me, the hard part was keeping that interesting. So I was forever, cutting out paragraphs. Say it in a couple of words. Say it in a couple of words. And my wife would say, "I don't know what you're talking about." And so cut it out. So that was the easiest part. The hardest part, I think, is the dialogue. Is trying to make people, trying to hear their voices, trying to talk through people's voices and not make them sound alike. And like an artist, how do I describe it? You ever see a painting that looks flat? The reds and the blues and the greens are all kind of the same, and nothing stands out, nothing is particularly attractive about it. That's the danger of bad dialogue. The people, they all sound like the same person talking through various mouths. And it's hard to do, to get yourself to move into another person's brain and another person's being and make that real. Maybe I could describe a little bit of the dialogue.
Absolutely.
These people that we're talking about here aren't really dramatically different, but they are different. We're at a poker game, And Mr. Gold has been part of this poker game for years. And a certain brother-in-law of mine reminded me of a poker game that he was part of for many years, so I threw that in, and it seemed like a convenient way to talk about things. So there they are at the poker game, and he gets a call from this mother that her daughter died at the workhouse. So he makes an appointment with her for the next day. Okay, so here we go. The guys looked at him when he took his seat, tacitly asking him, "What was that?" Some lady said her daughter died at the Women's Correctional Institution. "Oh, I heard that story on the radio coming over here," said Steve, a professor at Denison University, east of Columbus. "A black woman awaiting trial. Didn't hear the cause of death." Barry said, "Drugs. She overdosed, I'll bet. Let me tell you, kids these days, they can't stay away from them. They don't want to work. They just want to have babies and get more welfare and spend it all on drugs. I only wish we had politicians who'd crack down and turn this country around before it's too late." Wow, Barry, sounds like you got her all figured out. You condemn her and her entire lazy generation and pull out a Jeremiah of the world going to hell before you even know why she died. "Good job," said Steve. "My students at Denison are neither better nor worse than those I taught a decade ago in the 60s, except perhaps for a decline in English and math skills. Drugs are a problem, but not the end of the world. Maybe not in your private school in the suburbs, but down in the hood where I work, it's another story. Day in and day out, truant kids walk past my salvage yard higher than a kite looking for trouble. We had to add barbed wire on top of our fence along with the mean and hungry Rottweiler. I'm telling you, they'd steal the shirt off my back if I didn't keep it buttoned," said Barry. "Why do you think that is?" said Fred. "It's the drugs. Takes away their brains. Today's kids live for the high. It's out of control, and it's not getting better," Barry said. "Don't you think there's an economic side to this, Barry?" asked Steve, pushing his point. "Aren't drugs and theft more likely among poor than those who are better off?" "Sure," said Barry. "And why do you think they're poor? Because they're spending all their goddamn welfare money on drugs." Steve refused to back down. "Don't you think other factors are at work? What about discrimination? What about poor schools? What about in black communities? What about the effects of slavery on black society? What about..." Barry interrupted. "Oh, you bleeding heart liberals are all the same, making excuses for their lack of effort. Jobs are always available for those who want to work." "Will you two knock it off and play?" said Fred, tapping his fingers on the table. "I didn't come for a lecture. If I wanted that, I'd stay home and listen to my wife tell me how much better her first husband was. Besides, I've got a good hand for a change." Alan didn't fold when Fred went all in. His 3 kings defeated Fred's 2 pairs. "Well," said Alan, "her daughter's dead. It's all I've got right now. Stay tuned."
Good
Next questions?
selections, good, perfect selection.
Thank you.
Arnie, before we open up, so what would you like your readers to get from the book?
Well, I hope you find it fun to read, and I hope you want to turn pages. And when you finish, I hope that you might think about things. And if you think about some things you've never thought about before, I'll be happy. My goal, I'm going to tell you, my goal is to have this book banned.
That will ensure its success.
If there are questions, I'd love to answer them.
You guys, raise your hand. Good.
Skip?
Did you go meet the parolee?
What?
Did you go meet the parolee in your suit that night?
Oh, sure.
Well, you're a good parole officer.
I mean, that's right. It's my job. I went into the bar, and I was the guy who stopped the music, and everybody. I mean, that happened, and I said to him, "You know, I'm going to have to take you in." Well, it's all right. I guess you got to do what you got to do. How long have you been here? Oh, 10 hours, 12 hours. How much have you been drinking? Oh, quite a bit. So I took him into prison. This guy had spent more of his life in prison than out. And he got there joyous. Joyous. Happy. I took him to the old jail. If you remember the one that was built in the 1800s, I took him there. And Susan wondered why we were a little late for dinner, like about 2 hours to 3 hours. And I went to see him either that day or the next day, and he already got a job at the kitchen. He was home.
Hans, let's hear it for Zach in Bexley Library for all he does.
Lee.
Zach, wait, hon, wait. Here comes the microphone.
Arnie, this could be for you, the lawyer, or it could be for the lawyer in the book. Take your pick. But there are a lot of television shows, a lot of movies about lawyers. Did either one of you relate to any of those characters?
No. In a word, no. I did not. This is not fashioned on any show or any character that I see on TV or what have you. I think that would be insulting to my readers. I think that they deserve, that character's already existed in show business. So no, my characters are all unique. None of them are patterned after a TV show.
Arnie, you had the storyline all along. So when you're setting up a character, you're creating this new character. Do you already have a place for where he's at? And then the next question is, that's how you come up with what he says, where he's at? I mean, where do you put the characters in?
Yeah. I'm not really sure, honey, how I come about that. You gotta, I guess part of it is, what do you want the character to say? I'm writing my second book now, and I'm having that question. What do you want the character to say, and how do you want what you want said? So, for example, in the book there'll be some, the jury is going to be considering this case. So some things I once said, I decided the juror should say them. Some things I once said, I want an inmate to say. Well, what kind of an inmate would say something like that? And that was a problem, because sometimes I had words in the inmate's mouth that people like Paul and my beta readers would say, they wouldn't talk like that. You're below them, you're above them, you're too white, you're too black. And that was another, I forgot about that. That was a big problem when I talked to agents. I was trying to get an agent, and thank goodness a publisher picked me up without an agent. But I talked to the agents, and they say, you can't write this book. I said, why not? You're not authentic. What does that mean? You're not a black woman. I said, wait a minute. You mean only black women can write about black, but I'm not a mayor either. I'm not a judge. I'm not every character is somebody different. I'm sorry, buddy. I don't think your book's going to sell. Well, I think we're proving it. I hope we're proving it wrong after you read it and tell your friends about it that that's not true. That one's imagination and one's good writing determines whether or not it's authentic, not whether or not it's only black women can write about black women and only white men can write about. I don't believe that for a moment. Think about Oliver Twist, The Tale of Two Cities. How many books do I have to mention to you about a writer who was never those characters? Some of the most wonderful characters of all were entirely made-up people. So I don't know if I answered your question, but also it's incremental. Sometimes the line gets taken from that character and moved over to somebody else. Sometimes you throw away the character because he's got nothing to say.
Can I jump in here
Sure.
with that? That's a very good question, Boogie. Anyway, some of you here will know this from your own works if you're writing. It's really kind of a mystical thing to say, but if you create a character and your imagination is incredible, often that character will do what it wants to do. It suddenly leads you. Like suddenly you're typing and like, how did that happen? So it's really hard to explain in the mental creative way, but it definitely happens that the story just has its own energy and its own rhythm, and sometimes you go with it and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you go, you're not going there, and sometimes you go, great idea.
Stephen King writes that the way he writes, he finds an interesting character and then finds out what the character wants to say. I joked with my wife frequently as I wrote the book, I'm writing a great chapter, I can't wait to find out how it ends. You don't know. You just you start to write it and you think, and it's really true. It happens. Where did that come from? How did I think of that? It just happens. It's part of the magic of writing.
Did you write on a schedule, like first thing in the morning or 4 hours a day, or did you write when you wanted to?
The question was, do I write on a schedule or do I write when I want to? I tried both ways. There's a guy named Jerry Jenkins who writes a lot of books and has courses on how to write books. And it's 4 hours a day and it's so many words before you can go home, you know. To me, I can't do that. So I tried that for a while. And then I found I was just writing words. It was non-productive. So I wrote when I felt like it, and for me, it was a very uneven process. Sometimes it's 4 or 5 hours, sometimes it's 20 minutes, sometimes it's not at all. I guess I'm not disciplined enough, but that's the way I wrote.
I was going to tell a quick little, Zach.
I was just curious, a lot of writers have like a reading practice that kind of goes alongside their writing. Were you reading any certain authors or certain genres to help like facilitate your writing or give you inspiration?
Yes, I read a lot. I particularly tried to read into literature written by black writers that I was ignorant of. And the reason for that is because if you're speaking from the characters who are particularly in 1979, you're speaking of black characters, you better know what they're saying, and who better than James Baldwin or Malcolm X or others who were speaking for the black community at that time as your basis to try to understand the problem. And frankly, I think it helped me a great deal to understand the plight. I created a Substack. You know what that is? Online discussion, like a little newspaper article, opinion page called Substack. And I have created one, and every month I write, and I've entitled it, it's funny that you mentioned that, Janet, I entitled it The Injustice of Criminal Justice. And because of the writings that I did, readings that I did, I should say, writings that I read, I was particularly upset about cash bond. The idea that rich people who can afford to travel and get out of the country, get out and pay the bond, and poor people who can't go to Reynoldsburg have to stay in jail. And it's absolutely, there's no other way to describe it except a form of economic discrimination. And you probably don't know this, but in our local jails, 70% of the people who are in there are awaiting trial, not being punished. They're awaiting trial. And the reason that they're there and others are not is because they're poor. And that's the only explanation for it. We have other, and I know what people are going to say, well, you can't let the criminal out. I read just the other day that somebody got out on bond and he killed somebody and he shot somebody. Yes, I'm sure those things have happened, but there are other ways than cash bond. We got GPS. We have ankle bracelets. They found in one city, all they did was email people and call people and say, your trial is next week. And they dramatically increased the number of people who show up for trial. We don't need cash bond. We don't need to separate people by money, because that's a form of discrimination that, it just destroys people, because they, you take somebody who has to be, who's held in jail for 3 months. Just think about what would happen if you got in jail for 3 months. You'd lose your house, you lose your job, you lose your family, your children, you lose it all. And then the prosecutor says, oops, I guess we made a mistake. Never mind, your case is dismissed. Yeah, what happens to my life now? Not my problem. Next case. And I'm sure you saw it on the bench all the time. And so that is a problem that the book, because that's her situation in the book, that she's in there just awaiting trial, and she's falsely charged. Thank you all. I appreciate it. I can't tell you what it meant to me.
Thank you, Arnold White, Mimi Chenfeld, and Janet Jackson for this wonderful evening. For those who joined us in person, I think in a couple minutes, Arnold will be at the tables over here available to sign books. So please stick around if you're interested in getting a signed copy.
Thank you.